Vince Cable, the tenor of your remarks today, the Tories practice ugly politics based on ideals not shared by Liberal Democrats. You're extremely keen to show your distaste for the people with whom you're working. Why?
Well, I work with people who I have different views with, and I think that's business-like and professional. We have good...
Nasty party?
I think some of the behaviour over the last few months, the dog whistle politics, needed to be drawn attention to, and that's what I did. And I did it in quite an abrasive way because I thought some of it was very unacceptable.
So you are stating your position very clearly, that you find a lot of what happens in the coalition distasteful.
I think in relation to the Tories, I think what we have to do is point out the positive things we've done, you know, like raising the tax threshold on the low pay. I think we have to point out the things we've stopped, like some of the action on labour markets and the Beecroft reform. And I say when they go over the top, as they have done with some of the dog whistle politics, I think we should criticise it, which is what I did.
Oh, yes, you criticised it, but and you're pretty clear that they're on the wrong track in the economy, but you supported the motion in the economy today, yet in private, when Nick Clegg called a meeting of the Parliamentary Party ahead of conference to discuss the approach to the economy, you argued against this approach.
No, I didn't. I was arguing, and indeed it's reflected in the motion, that we needed to be more adventurous in investing, for example, in housing and letting councils have more freedom to borrow to do it, and that has been incorporated.
But in that conversation, we understand from the BBC's political editor that overwhelmingly the support was for Nick Clegg, stick with the economic policy as marked out now by George Osborne, and you had very little support, and you are the man who a lot of people before the election trusted on the economy. Does that feel bruising?
You've got an interpretation of a private meeting. I mean, actually, there was no vote.
No.
Relatively small number of people spoke. A lot of people agreed with me.
But you used to be the guru. You used to be the guru of the party.
I have a major economic department, which I think is run competently, and we got major achievements through it. And I continue to exercise my views on economic policy in the government, I think with good effect.
But can you, when you in private, within your party, among other MPs, make so clearly felt your distaste for the economic trajectory?
No.
How can you actually operate as the business secretary? Surely it's an untenable position.
I don't have a distaste for the economic trajectory. I have been one of the main architects of the very difficult programme of fiscal adjustment we've had to make. I advocated it in opposition. I set out in detail a year before the last general election, more than anybody else, what we'd have to do. I've done it in office, I've delivered it, it's been very difficult. Clearly, as we move away from the crisis, we're going to have to pursue policies that are more geared to growth. I want to emphasise those. That's what I talked about in my speech.
But when you talk about something like, you know, you've made it very clear that you think that we're heading for a housing bubble. Now that was a major thing to say because it is at odds with George Osborne, it's at odds with Danny Alexander, it's at odds with Nick Clegg. That you think they're heading for a housing bubble, and you think, in fact, the Help to Buy should be... there should be a cessation or at least a curtailing of it.
Yes,
when you say something as public as that, which is at odds with the coalition in which you play a senior part, how can you put your hand on your heart and say that you think that you should be part of that coalition?
The judgments about the housing market have been expressed most effectively not by politicians but by people in the market itself.
But nobody in politics is listening to you.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, the judgments about inflation, of course, are made by the Bank of England rather than by politicians. That particular scheme which you discussed, we are discussing it in government. There's a variety of views, actually across the coalition, not just me personally.
But do you think that it's a kind of leitmotif of
Let me just finish the point. I mean, I am worried that we lose some of the recovery if we allow housing market bubble to get out of control. It is happening in London. The professionals are confirming that. There are a variety of ways we can deal with it, and I'm pointing to some of them in a constructive way.
So do you think the extension will not go ahead in January because it's only in new houses just now, and if it does go ahead, is that a massive mistake?
The government is committed to going ahead. It can go ahead in a variety of ways at different speeds. One of the issues which people have suggested is, well, why not apply it in certain parts of the country where the housing market's depressed? Northern Ireland is a classic example, but not in London and the South East, where there is a real problem.
So you think that unless there's a regional approach, there's a problem?
That's one way of looking at it.
Right.
There are other mechanisms of influencing the housing market. The Governor of the Bank of England has control of some of them. There is the liquidity policy activity, which has the effect at the moment of channeling money to mortgages. It could do it to small business. There are a variety of ways of managing this problem.
But when you publicly are so critical, is it either posturing that really it's only for the benefit of the activists and the party and the public, or do you actually believe it, in which case you could be, with respect, accused of being cowardly because you're not standing out and saying this is a huge problem, I do not like the direction this coalition is taking on the economy?
Well, on the housing market, I'm just having a perfectly adult debate about it. I mean, there is a problem. I was involved in big debates around this, if you remember, in the run-up to the last election and the financial crisis, and you know, I made the point then, which is still relevant, about the dangers of allowing a housing market to get out of control. And in a grown-up government, you have these public debates, and why shouldn't you?
Yes, you have these public debates, but you so clearly have set yourself at odds with the majority of MPs in your own party and the majority of the Conservatives.
I'm not sure that's true, but you know, you obviously have a different analysis from me.
Well, let's look at something, for example. What do you call the bedroom tax? What do the Liberal Democrats call it?
The government's phrase is the spare room subsidy.
The spare room subsidy. We have a situation where the SNP, the Scottish Government said they wouldn't, SNP said they wouldn't hold on to it. The Labour in Scotland have said that all your activists today took part in a debate in which said they want to review it. Would you like to see the ending of the so-called bedroom tax?
I think the principle is fine, actually. The idea of aligning the housing benefit system within the public sector and the private sector is a perfectly reasonable one. But what has happened in practice, and I see this as a local member of parliament, are individual hard cases, particularly disabled people. And what you need to deal with that is sufficient resource at a local level to deal with
housing.
hard cases.
I mean, would you as a politician say sorry? Because for many people, including obviously people that voted at conference today, this was a policy, if it indeed itself wasn't ill-advised, the way it was introduced was ill-advised.
Well, the way to deal with these pressures in the public sector is to have more social housing, and that's what the debate was about today. And I, as an individual, and my colleagues at Liberal Democrat, want to see a lot more social housing, and that's what the economic motion was about.
When do you think the sensible, opportune, whatever way you want to put it, time would be to end the coalition before the election?
I'm not going to give you an opinion on that. That's something that has to be collectively decided by our Lib Dem team as we get much closer to the time, and there's no way I can guess that.
But it is possible that it would end, you know, the elections in 18 months, it is possible, presumably, it would end, say, in 12 months' time. It is possible.
All kind of things are possible, but I'm not going to be able to give you any useful information on that.
Instinctively, do you feel more comfortable with Labour than you do with Tories?
I approach it as a professional politician. I'm used to working with people I disagree with. I don't make decisions in public life for which I'm paid on the basis of my guts. I do it on the basis of my brain and my judgment. That's what I'm paid for.
Yes, you make those decisions on those bases, but when those decisions are rejected or ignored, if you are making those decisions in principle, it must feel very distressing.
No, because I think a lot of the arguments that I and my colleagues have had in government, we're winning. And if you look at the work of my department, we're doing an enormous amount through our industrial strategy, through training, our work on innovation. I consider that a really great success story. And even where we've had very, very difficult policies around university finance, we turned it round. And that's what I get satisfaction from.
Do you still text Ed Miliband and Ed Balls?
I have had very, very little. I've never texted Ed Balls ever, but I met him once in a television studio and we had an
But you still text Ed Miliband?
No, we have very, very little communication, but we deal with each other on a business-like, professional basis.